The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have announced their preseason schedule and some fun joint practices to go along with it. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Friday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. And don't forget, you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure that you're following us on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, reunited with my co-host, Mr. David Harrison at DHarrison82. We are your hosts of Locked On Bucs, credentialed members of the media covering your beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm the deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. David is a staff writer over at BucsGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site, covering the Bucs, and we are here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, we want to thank you and show you our appreciation for your continued support of this little show of ours.
On today's episode of Locked On Bucs, we're discussing another injury to wide receiver Russell Gage and comments made recently by a former Tampa Bay Buccaneers player. But first, James, we talking about practice.
We talking about practice. We talking about practice. We talking about practice.
I did not know that was on a loop. Please edit some of those out.
Absolutely not. I'm here for every single one of the Allen Iverson. Not a game. Not the game that I live and die for. We're talking about practice, man.
We talking about practice.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have officially announced their preseason schedule. And in addition to the games, we have some joint practices. The Bucs will host the Pittsburgh Steelers on Friday, August 11th. They will travel to the New York Jets for a game Saturday, August 19th. And then they will end things hosting the Baltimore Ravens on Saturday, August 26th. The last two seasons, the Bucs have hosted joint practices one more time because it's new enough and not annoying yet.
We talking about practice.
With the Titans and with the Dolphins. Last time this episode, I promise. This year, they'll be the guest team joining the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers for a few joint sessions. Real quick, interesting fun fact. Some Bucs fans hate when I mention that I cover the Commanders on this show, but they might be interested to know that myself and former Arizona State tight end Curtis Hodges, who is on the Washington Commanders roster, spent some time after practice on Wednesday talking about Rachaad White. So I'm talking Bucs at Commanders practice. Just, I don't know. I thought maybe some Bucs fans might appreciate that fact. And Curtis has been talking to Rachaad, super excited about what he's done already and thinks that Rachaad is in for a very big season this year as well. So I don't know, for what it's worth.
And, you know, our listeners, our viewers, they never know when a former Commander is going to end up being a Buccaneer, and who better to talk about that, what that player brings than you. And on the flip side, you never know when a Buccaneer might become a Commander, and then already you're like, I know all about this guy. I got this covered. It's a beautiful thing. But
I'm not going to lie. Back when Levante David was 100% leaving the team, I was like, please let him come to the Commanders. But anyway, I'm happy he's still a Buck, obviously. But if he wasn't going to be a Buck, I was like, man, please let this dude come to Washington.
Oh, that would have been a lot of fun. But I do have some thoughts about these joint practices because although it was fun for the Bucs to host it the last couple times, you and I were there for Dolphins Week last season. Got to watch Tyreek and got to watch Tua and you know, we had a lot of fun at those practices. But this time, I think the Jets are actually the perfect team for the Bucs to do joint practices with. And they're the perfect team for a couple of reasons. You have two teams now where they're going to have a brand new starting quarterback this season. The Bucs in Baker or Trask, and then obviously the Jets with Aaron Rodgers. But not only that, having Baker and Kyle Trask, and one thing that I do want to see, if it's still a competition at that point, I want both of them to get the opportunity to lead the ones against the Jets ones. I want to see Baker try to get the ball to Mike or Chris against Sauce Gardner. I want to see Rachaad White having to run through a pretty formidable front seven for the New York Jets. This matchup between these two, I think, can elevate players, and I think it can also expose players. And yeah. I legit, as soon as I heard that it was the joint practices with the Jets, I could not have been happier because of what it's going to do for both of these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, just talking about the coaching matchup, Robert Saleh, Todd Bowles, like these are two of the best defensive minds in the game today. I'm a big Robert Saleh fan. I know this isn't Locked On Jets, so forgive me. But look, the man knows what he's doing, right? And this team has built a very solid roster on paper. And then again, paper matters only so much. But this is the New York Jets are they were the fourth best scoring defense last year. I had to look that up just to make sure. But that's the defense that you're now putting your offense against. And again, the value of joint practices, the coaches will say it, the players will say it. Like with James, when we talked about all these players walking off the field after the Miami Dolphins joint practices, like to a man, they all said some form of, it's really good to go out there and practice against a team that doesn't care about you. Like it's kind of a weird thing to hear someone say, but at the same time, it's very, very true. Like, you know, when you're Jamel Dean lined up against Chris Godwin, like you don't want Chris Godwin to get re-injured. You don't want Chris Godwin to look foolish. You don't want Chris Godwin's confidence to wane, right? So does that make you not practice hard at all? No, you're still a competitor, right? But there is a part of you that doesn't want this dude across from you to fail, which is just naturally, you know, by human nature going to make you play just a little bit less, less difficult. Now, there are still rules, right? There are still rules, and like you're not supposed to be like laying dudes out and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, you're going to get a much harder competition when you're going up against another team. And the biggest part that Bruce Arians always loved when he was the head coach about these joint practices is you actually get to run your systems. Like you actually get to run your defense, run your offense. Because guess what? You're not going to see the New York Jets for the next 18 weeks. And if you see them again after that, it's going to be in the Super Bowl. And what you did in July, August timeframe, and what you're going to do in February, maybe not completely different, but you know what, man? Like, honestly, if we get to the Super Bowl and you know a few of my tricks, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm good with that because you also have 20 plus weeks of film to study on me, right? And like that's something I'm willing to risk is that, hey, we'll both be in the Super Bowl. That's not a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's ever going to say, like, oh, Todd Bowles needs to be fired because how dare you do joint practices with the team that you end up facing in the Super Bowl. Nah, man. Like, that's not going to be the narrative next February if that's what happens. You know what I mean? So I absolutely love it. And yeah, Baker against Sauce, Kyle against Sauce. Like, I don't care who the quarterback is. Like bring Blaine Gabbert back. I don't know if he's been released yet by the team that signed him. Like, if you're going up against this defense, there's nothing. There's almost not a better team in the NFL right now that you can think of to have this Buccaneers squad go up against because they present everything that you need your team to work on. So I applaud it. I'm all for it. And I already told you this pre-recording. It kind of has me pausing a little bit on my training camp plans, but you know, Commanders have joint practices with the Ravens. I've got to be there for that. So it kind of is what it is. But man, if I could go to New York to watch those joint practices, that would be something that I would love to jump on.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. You get to go watch, you know, Rodgers and Sauce like we talked about, and your guy Garrett Wilson be out there, and the rest of all of the Packers that came with Aaron Rodgers. So I can't even remember who all went with him. It was like Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard
and Randall Cobb. Yeah. No, it'd be great to see Alan Lazard running routes and catching passes, and Randall Cobb. I mean, I'm sure, you know, drinking Gatorade or something. I don't know what he'll be doing out there.
He'll be like the wise old grandpa sitting on the bench telling stories of back in my day.
They might as well make that dude inactive and just make him an assistant coach. I don't know. Like, no offense. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to make too disrespectful. Anyway, speaking of old people, a former Buccaneers player has faith in this 2023 Buccaneers squad, and we're going to talk about that next. Coming up here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Bucs is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and the calories, and you need the best tasting protein bar ever, that's Built. You got to try this. Built Bars are healthy and they taste amazing. They taste so amazing, you're not even going to realize they're good for you while you're devouring them. They're all covered in 100% real dark chocolate and come in unbelievably amazing flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. They taste like candy bars, but they contain amazing macros, bringing you just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but packing 17 grams of protein. And the best part is you can get them at your local Walmart, Sam's Club, or to your door via Built.com. Head to your nearest Walmart today and find 4-bar boxes of cookies and cream, double chocolate, and coconut puffs. Or if you're near a Sam's Club, head on in there and get a 13-bar box of brownie batter puff and churro puff. Or you can go to Built.com right now and get in on the return of coconut brownie chunk puff. However you do it, however you get it, go to Built.com, get yourself some Built Bars. You got to try this. Thanks again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen today and every day. And a special thanks again to our everydayers coming through here consistently, just like we try to come through consistently for you. Just like Gerald McCoy at one time in his life came through consistently for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, one of the best Tampa Bay Buccaneers during his time with the Pewter Pirates. No longer a part of the team, but he has not forgotten where he came from. And he is about the only person that is technically on the national stage, although I don't know if Gerald McCoy has made it past like probationary period of national media status. But for right now, he's national media status. So we're going to run with it because he's the only national media person given any love to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Recently guest hosting on Good Morning Football and on NFL Network, Gerald McCoy said, among other things, quote, "I still believe that we will take that division," Gerald McCoy said of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for whom he no longer plays for. Y'all may not believe, but I believe it. Batman is all on board, James. So that brings up an interesting topic because we've talked a lot about how the national media does not respect the Buccaneers. They don't respect Baker Mayfield, and they think basically that this team is just cruising for Caleb Williams. And I know there's some Bucs fans that support that theory, and they want that to be what happens, and that's fine. But we have been on the record very adamantly for various reasons saying that the Buccaneers are not going to be as bad as everybody seems to think they are. Evan Klosky doesn't seem to think the Buccaneers are going to be as bad as everybody thinks they are. Logan Robinson doesn't think that the Buccaneers are going to be as bad as everybody thinks they are. Matt Matera certainly is on that train as well. But we haven't really talked about whether or not we're on the same level as Gerald McCoy. Gerald McCoy says, we will take that division. James, will the Buccaneers win the NFC South? Are you Batman bold or are you Superman soft? I just came up with that, by the way. Will the Buccaneers win the NFC South? Do you agree with this national media member?
Well, and I didn't see the context in which that was said. Is there a way that Gerald McCoy can like backtrack out of this and he can play it off as, well, I was a Carolina Panther too, and we won the division. Anyway, I'm not Batman bold. I'm not Superman soft. I'm like Wolverine wavering.
I like it. I like it.
I truly believe that the Buccaneers can win this division. Based on the teams within the division, based on the schedule, I believe the Buccaneers can win the NFC South. If I have to make a decisive decision right now, today, May 25th, I say no, they do not win the division.
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, can the Buccaneers win the NFC South? Sure, absolutely. Right now, I put the Buccaneers second. Like if paper, if this game was played on paper, I put the Buccaneers second behind the New Orleans Saints. And I put them ahead of the Atlanta Falcons, and then I put the Carolina Panthers last because, look, I'm not going to give Bryce Young credit for things he hasn't done yet. You know what I mean? And Desmond Ridder, I'm not saying he's the greatest quarterback ever.
Hold up. Can we all just take a second to appreciate the fact
that I didn't say CJ
on the first try named the correct Carolina Panther rookie quarterback? Bravo. Hey, all right.
I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to give Bryce Young credit for things he hasn't done yet. And look, Desmond Ridder hasn't done anything either. but he at least has a year of NFL tutelage and studying and some play experience under his belt, right? So I'm going to give the Atlanta Falcons the edge there. Plus, they've got a wicked mad run game, which the Carolina Panthers do not have. The Carolina Panthers, as far as I'm concerned, don't even have weapons for their new number one overall quarter. Like, this is a totally different topic. By the time the Carolina Panthers put a roster around Bryce Young that he can actually win with, they're going to have to pay Bryce Young.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Likely top quarterback money, because his agent's going to say, hey, it's not our fault. You haven't given him the tools. Anyway, that's a different discussion for a different show. But yeah, I think the Bucs could win the NFC South. I'm not going to say they will win the NFC South, but I don't think it's a slam dunk in any direction. So I appreciate Gerald McCoy's brazen, claims there. I'm tongue in cheek talking about the we. I mean, he obviously has the right to say we more than anybody on this show, and most likely anybody listening to this show. So it's just, it's just me poking fun because I'm a silly guy sometimes. But he didn't just come on and say that the Bucs are going to win the division. He also gave some reasons. One of those reasons is what Baker Mayfield has to work with here, because obviously he thinks that Baker's going to be the starting quarterback. And he said, quote, Baker's going to have to lean heavily on somebody I believe is a very underrated wide receiver in history, Mike Evans. He's been a model of consistency, and they're going back to a time where you had to actually find different ways to try and win instead of saying, hey, we have number 12 on our team, end quote. So that brings up another interesting topic, James, that we're going to talk about here. Where do Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask rank in the history of Mike Evans quarterbacks? Now, we all know that Mike Evans, I mean, no NFL receiver has had as many 1,000-yard seasons to start their NFL career as Mike Evans has. And some people say, well, yeah, but that's because of injury. Well, hey, dude, staying healthy is important in playing football. So Mike Evans, that's not a detraction. That's actually still a benefit for him. And Mike has been injured as well and played injured to get some of these 1,000-yard seasons. So here's the quarterbacks, just for those who don't remember. Josh McCown, Mike Glennon, Jameis Winston, who, look, calm down, Seminoles fans. Okay, up and down, got it. Ryan Fitzpatrick, who outside of 3 games, and Tom Brady. Okay, greatest ever. Got it. So we're gonna put Baker and Kyle in this list together because it's quarterback competition. We don't know which one of them is starting, but let's pretend both of them are starting. Where do you rank them? But start with 1 and let's go to 7. Where do you rank the Mike Evans quarterbacks in his historic run as a 1,000-yard receiver?
Number 1, obviously, Napoleon Dynamite himself, Mike Glennon. No, number 1 is Tom Brady. At number 2, I do have Jameis Winston, and our everydayers who have been around for a long time know my feelings on Jameis Winston and know how frustrated I was with him at the end of his tenure with the Buccaneers. But give the man his due. When he was on, he was on. It was fantastic. It was a lot of fun to watch.
That was exciting.
Number 3, I have Baker Mayfield right now. Mm-hmm. I do think Baker could move up ahead of Jameis Winston. I do think he could fall down to 6 or 7 on this list. Yeah, there's you just don't know what could happen. But I would say sheer talent, I think he deserves to be number 3 before even suiting up for the Bucs. Number 4, Fitzmagic. That was a really fun run. And the beard and all of that. Then I have Josh McCown, who he was bad. And then I have Kyle Trask, who I think is basically on par with Josh McCown. Prove me wrong, Kyle. Prove me wrong. Yeah. I'll eat my crow. And then after Kyle Trask, I have Mike Glennon, who was just awful. He wasn't bad. He was awful.
Yeah. All right. So my turn. I had the exact same ranking. And listen, we talk every day as we've talked about this. We like to do this to where we don't know what each other is doing. I filled out my rankings, and then on our document, I turned my text white so that James couldn't see my text. He did his list. I revealed my list. We have the exact same rankings, which means it's infallible. It's perfect. This is the rankings of Mike Evans quarterbacks. Gerald wasn't done. However, he also said, quote, they got Rachaad White at running back. Go Sun Devils. He didn't say that. I said that. He made a big jump last year as a rookie. They still have Chris Godwin. But then he doubled down on the Mike Evans. But Mike Evans is going to play an integral role on this offense. In this offense, man, they're going to have to lean heavily on Mike. End quote. James, final question, segment 2. Will Mike Evans hit 1,000 yards? And does it matter if he does it in 16 or 17 games?
Well, and real quick, Devontae Adams, his fellow class of 2014 wide receiver, came out and said he's one of the best receivers in the NFL. Like he's getting praise for people. Yes, Mike Evans will still hit 1,000 yards this season. And no, it doesn't matter if it's 16 or 17 games. All you can do is play the NFL season. And you know what? If people want to whine and complain, oh, well, it took Mike 17 games. Yeah, we'll go back and look at how many times he did it in 13, in 14, in 15. So you average it out and he's still good. But you play the schedule. You play the schedule. It doesn't matter anymore whether it takes 16 or 17.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yes. If Mike Evans can get 1,000 yards with Fitzmagic, Josh McCown, and Mike Glennon, he can get 1,000 yards with Baker Mayfield. If it's Kyle Trask, we'll talk about that later. But and no, it absolutely doesn't matter.
It's Kyle Trask
because
2,000 yards.
It's 2,000 yards because we're just throwing it to Mike Evans Mike Evans is gonna have 30 catches a game. And no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I understand that people will say, well, it used to be, whatever. But that's an old man's problem, honestly, because in the chronicles of history, nobody's ever going to put an asterisk on how many games they played. Because I got news for anybody, like the NFL season wasn't always 16 games either. So interesting stuff there, James. We've got a little bit more to talk about here. This isn't as interesting as much as it is disappointing. Russell Gage is injured yet again. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Wrapping things up here on a Friday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. Shout out to all of our everydayers and those of you who strive to be everydayers. David, I got a DM from somebody over across the pond talking about the Thursday night football discussion that we had. And he said, my brother and I are planning to come, over there for a Thursday game. Well, now we have to book our trip to also encapsulate the weekend just in case. But he referred to himself as a most dayer. I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm appreciate everything.
We'll get him up to an everydayer, but we appreciate our everydayers, our most dayers, and those that are just now joining us. We love each and every one of you, but there is something a wee bit concerning outside of Thursday night flex scheduling. And I realize it's May. So we're not hitting the panic button yet. We're not sounding the alarms. We're not, completely freaking out, but we do need to talk about Russell Gage because when Baker Mayfield spoke to the media on Tuesday, he mentioned that Gage was not at OTAs because of an injury he suffered. This is a guy that suffered from and played through multiple injuries last season in his first year with the Buccaneers. And again, our everydayers know how excited I was about the acquisition of Russell Gage. I knew what he could bring as a receiver. I was excited to see him in the offense. And, now he's missing his first opportunity to come in and work with a new quarterback. And is it time to start looking at Russell Gage as a liability rather than an asset?
He's not a liability, right? Because so for me, and this could be a term of semantics, right? To be a liability, you have to be somebody that causes a problem for your team. Now, his not being on the field is a problem for the team, but I don't honestly put that on Russell Gage. I put that on Jason Light and Todd Bowles. Not that Russell Gage is not on the field, but that the fact that Russell Gage isn't on the field is a problem for this team, because it's only a problem because you didn't anticipate it and you didn't prepare for it, right? And when I look at this, look, I wasn't as excited about Russell Gage coming to the Bucs as you were, granted, but I saw the upside, I saw the potential, and I was hopeful for what might happen. And some people will look at the stat box, say, well, the dude played in 13 games, he only missed 4 games. That's, it's not great, but it's not as bad as it maybe sounds. But in that process, he only played 58% of the offensive snaps for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last season, in a league where nowadays, your third receiver is mostly considered a starter. So if you got a guy that's playing a position that's considered a starter, you're playing 58% of the snaps. That's not good. He played the second fewest snaps he's played since he became a starter in the National Football League. He didn't start a game in his rookie year in 2018, but he started 4. in 2019 for the Atlanta Falcons. He started 4 in 2022 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And in that season, he played 516 in 2019, that is. And then he played 762, 612, 529. This guy is on a downward spiral, and it's nothing against him. We've had this discussion before. Sometimes your body doesn't agree with your career choices. If that's what's going on with Russell Gage, I feel for him. I really do, because he's definitely an NFL caliber talent. He's a good young wide receiver. Never heard anything bad about him as far as locker room presence, off-field incidents, nothing like that. So I definitely feel for the young man. But from a team standpoint, and we talked about this, you have to draft based on what you have, not based on what you hope you're going to get. And the Buccaneers basically came in there and hoped that they were going to get a healthy Russell Gage, because they let Scotty Miller walk. And the only people they brought in are Trey Palmer, which I understand there's some upside there, but this is a 6th-round draft pick. Like, you're not looking at a 6th-round pick as your number 3 receiver. They brought in Cade Warner, who I'm not going to talk about because I don't want to be mean. Raheem Jarrett, you know what I mean? I like Raheem because he's in kind of in my area. I'm familiar with Maryland Terrapins football, so I like Raheem. But again, not a number 3 receiver. But if you don't have Russell Gage, your options are Trey Palmer, Raheem Jarrett, Devin Tompkins, or Kalen Geiger. None of those guys are ready to be a starting wide receiver in the National Football League. They're just not. So, the flip side of this conversation is, okay, but where do you get rid of a guy? You know what I mean? And that's just kind of another conversation about just the state of this roster. Cody Mauch, like, do you want to get rid of Cody Mauch? No, you don't want to get rid of Cody Mauch, because behind him, you don't have a lot of, superb, I guess, talents, right? Kalijah Kancey, you need that defensive line presence. Yaya Diaby, you need that outside. Like, if I had to pick a guy, it would probably be Yaya, but I don't want to give Yaya back for another guy. But if I get Josh Palmer out of North Carolina in here instead of Yaya Diaby, and I don't have the ranking or the draft pick order in front of me, maybe Josh Palmer was gone by that time. But we talked about the needs for this team entering the NFL draft. I had wide receiver a little bit higher than some people did. This is why, because if you draft based on what you have 2 receivers and a bunch of special teams guys with potentials. That's what the Buccaneers with potential. I don't know why I made that plural. That's what the Buccaneers should have drafted based off of. They didn't draft based off of that, because I think any NFL team with the needs that they had and the fact that you only have 2 receivers that you can really count on, I think you have to draft a receiver in the first 5 rounds. They didn't do that. And, I don't, again, like you said, it's not time to hit the panic button. And that's what it sounds like I'm doing. I get that. But if this Russell Gage injury situation creeps up again the way that it did already last year and the way that it has in the last 3 years of his career, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah, it certainly is. And maybe, Gage ends up being fine, and maybe he plays maybe he plays 70+% of snaps this season. And everyone saw when he was on the field and being utilized how much he could bring to the team. And he took some vicious shots. And he's one of these guys that's not scared to go over the middle. He's not scared of the contact. And he made some incredible catches. But I mean, yeah, it would have been nice to draft a guy, because it's not that there aren't experienced wide receivers out there that the Buccaneers could probably sign for cheap. I mean, Kenny Golladay? Could Dave Canales really revitalize Kenny Golladay? Probably not. It would take a lot, but I mean, if you remember Kenny Golladay from the Lions, there's a reason the Giants gave him a ton of money, and it was because he was so good. You got Byron Pringle, N'Keal Harry, Brashad Perryman is still floating out there. Would he come back? Old and busted.
Yeah, I mean, look, none of those guys are as dynamic, but I mean, they're better than what you have.
Right.
I mean, Kenny Golladay, maybe not, but the other guys are at least better than what you have, currently facing you as who's going to be your number 3 receiver. By the way, Darius Davis, wide receiver at TCU, who also, by the way, has return ability, was available when the Buccaneers took Yaya Diaby. And again, nothing against Yaya, but like I said, if you look at this receiver group the way that we just discussed it, and you look at the outside linebacker group, I think the need for a receiver outweighs the need for an outside linebacker. I know this team was hyper focused on getting getting better in the pass rush, but you have to look at your team holistically. Trey Tucker, wide receiver at Cincinnati, was also available when the Buccaneers took Yaya Diaby. Both those guys coming in as a number 4 option, solid, good. Coming in as a number 3 option, not great, but again, better than what they have right now.
Yeah, we're going to have to, obviously, again, it's May. We're going to have to see how all of this shakes out, but it is worth noting that this could be a lingering issue. This could be a serious concern heading into the season. And like we talked about way back in the day with OJ Howard, and you mentioned it here, sometimes your body doesn't agree with your career choice. And I think it's also worth noting that a lot of Gage's issues have been soft tissue issues. Now, we don't know what his injury is that Baker was referencing, but we're not going to be privy to that information because the Buccaneers don't have to share it. So unless Russell Gage comes out and talks about it, we're not going to know. But a lot of his injuries that he was dealing with and playing through and missing time with last year were soft tissue injuries. So hopefully it's much to do about nothing. And Russell Gage is going to tear it up and have 750 yards and 6 touchdowns and convert the most third downs on the team, and we're going to be singing his praises and doing the Russell Gage dance. I haven't made it up yet, but we'll figure one out if we need to. But David, that is going to do it for this episode. We want to thank everybody.
We're talking about practice.
We are talking about practice, not a game. All right, I will keep going with that for the next 5 minutes. We want to thank all of you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Shout out to our most dayers striving to be everydayers. We love each and every one of you. If you guys have thoughts, ideas, questions, topics, anything at all, of course, you can send those in to lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com or DM us on Twitter at Locked On Bucs. Check out all of David's work. You can't see my hand when I do it that way. Check out all of David's work over on bucksgameday.com and follow him on Twitter at dharrison82. Check out my work over at bucksnation.com. Follow me at @Yarcho_Bucs. And of course, follow the show at Locked On Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. We thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.